expensive. So.
Hi there. Hi there. And we're going to do an assessment of number 5 Staveley Avenue. It's in Stalybridge, which is an area into the hills in the east side of Manchester. That's right. So let's get into it, and I'm going to start talking about condition, and then we'll get into demographics, capital growth, and so on. The very first thing is I'll go through the sales particulars because that helps, and then we go from there. This property has had a thorough and recent renovation, and you can see that's a brand new kitchen. Now, the grass has died. When you look at the Vuber stuff, it hasn't done so well, unfortunately, but this is a story of someone, an enterprising person, buying the property for 90 grand and in 2019, and then doing a thorough renovation to flip the property, as they say. So they're hoping to achieve somewhere like 170, 180, and good luck to them. So apparently the property is already under offer. There is, and by the way, the reason I'm not talking about condition is because there's very little to talk about. It's in very good condition. It looks fine. The issue with places like this, though, is to make sure that there aren't damp issues lurking. And one of the ways we can identify that is by looking at the front of the building to see if the property...
Also,
it's 20...
Wait. No, it's 60... 5. It's only
number
5.
5.
Yep, and the issue, I wanted to find the sale particular for the previous sale, but they used the newest. Okay. But I know what I will do. I will find it on Rightmove Plus. So
here's the property. It's been ripped apart, and that's fine. You know, it's good. The thing about properties like this are they are very appealing to owner occupiers because all the work is done essentially. So what I'm interested in is whether these properties have damp-proof courses or not. I assume it has. They're relatively modern properties. So these would have been built in the 60s, would that be right?
It's 50s.
Yeah, so it will have damp-proof course just because of its age. If it was 1930s, then the building technology wasn't really there, and they didn't really understand damp-proof coursing so well, but in the 50s they did. So anyway, let's get back to the particulars. The place has got a brand new bathroom, and one thing that's quite interesting about this property is how they've reconfigured the layout a little bit. So I'll just open this up. Here we are. And I'm going to open this. Here we go. And there's that garden, not looking so happy, unfortunately. It's also not a very nice garden because it's got this slope, which makes it difficult to use. But anyway, looking at the rear, the original door was there, and there must have been steps coming out, and you can see the old bricks there. And there was a window, obviously, and you can see the old lintel. And what they've decided to do is run that kitchen across, which is actually a good decision. So whoever did the renovation on this basically knew what they were doing, because a lot of times what people would not do is touch the door. They would just leave it. The downside to this is that you don't have direct access onto the garden. Now let's carry on. And I'm just not quite clear. That must be a representative of the owner. Nice young man. And I am going to just get the floor plan for this. I presume there is one. Yeah, so the compromise is that there's no access to the rear. And therefore, to get to the garden, I assume you have to go out the front door, go around the back.
But that's not okay. Yeah.
It's okay. It's okay because what you gain is a much bigger kitchen, but what you lose is convenient access to the garden.
Yeah, but
So,
the kitchen looks really nice, and
yeah,
the person who did it, he knows what he's doing. So
yeah. Anyway, that's good. Let's have a look at the videos and see what they say. And here we are. And here we go. And there we are. So the roof looks fine. What I'm looking for are signs of slipped slates. There aren't any to speak of. There won't be any flooding here. It's on the side of a hill. The water's going to drain off. It's a reasonable area with reasonable cars, so that's good. They could have painted the wall, but they decided not to. They could have jet washed the concrete. They didn't. They could have done something with that exterior, but they haven't. And here's the interior. Modern look. This is very fashionable, this grey, which I quite like. But in 20 years' time, we'll look back at that and say, how did people live in houses with so much grey? What we really want is bright magnolia. And there's our friend. Look at him there. And there's the property. It looks very clean. Everything's been redone, painted, decorated. Lovely fresh kitchen. Again, the fashionable grey. If I was specifying renovations, of course I'd go for the grey because I like it. I think it's a good modern colour, but it will date in 10 or 15 years. We've got the boiler there. The downside is that you've got all this exposed. They haven't boxed it in. Fair enough.
They have door for the garden.
Oh, there's your
now.
door. Okay, well, that's well done. And then there's a storeroom. Now, you can't make that a lavatory. The issue here is you've got all the electrics there. They probably considered making it into a downstairs lavatory, but with the electrics and water in the same room, not such a good idea. It's a well done house, actually. It's nicely done overall.
Yeah.
And again, more grey carpet, very nice.
Yeah, it's fully renovated and in details.
And you can see why you can see why this place is desirable and why lots of people are bidding for it, because it's all fully renovated. And if you're a homeowner, or an owner-occupier, should I say, it's still relatively easy to get a lot of mortgage finance. So somebody like this, they'll come in at 90% loan to value or even 95% loan to value. And it represents good value because they can essentially, if you think about it, if you go 90% loan to value, for every £1,000 you save as an extra deposit, you get £10,000 back in extra mortgage if you have the affordability. So therefore, home buyers really like properties which are renovated because then they can gear up and they can just mortgage the whole thing up. What they don't like is properties that need a certain amount of renovation, like a fairly deep paint and decorate where everything's just a bit tatty, because that £10,000 that they put into renovation could give them £100,000 or nearly £100,000 in extra mortgageability, you know, an extra mortgage size. So it just makes sense for owner occupiers to buy these kind of properties, and then they bid them up, and that's why you're seeing so much competition, and why, in a sense, it's a nice property, but it would always be a problem out competing owner occupiers for this. If you were able to offer cash, well, that's another story. So the so that's so I'll talk about that in a second whilst we get into
I want to speak about EPC after.
Okay, well, you do EPC then.
Yeah, I was until you open the map a couple of ago. So the EPC was E, but the problem with it is E just because it's made in the when it was in bad condition before renovation. So the property,
it's going to be way higher, obviously.
Yeah, it will be C at least, because, and I will analyze now and I will let you know. So the wall, assume, but I guess it's good. The roof have insulation, which is good. The windows, some double glaze. Now everything is double glaze, main heating control, but now everything is good. So this will be increased. So basically everything will be increased. So he increased cavity wall, he increased floor insulation, he increased the proofing, he low energy, he increased heating, he increased. So replace the boiler, he changed it. Full gas, he changed it. So it will be C. Now, if you make a EPC, it will be C.
Yeah, I would go with you on that. Now I'm going to share my screen, and then we go back to the demographics and all of that beautiful stuff. So the reason this is important is obviously because it gives us context on where the property is, what the circumstances are with crime, and the kind of people that live around in these kind of places. Now, the thing with Stalybridge is that it's in the hills. So I'll show you again. And if I just go onto street level somewhere, it's just lots of hills, and that's okay. But oddly enough, too many hills, it's a problem. And people don't like hilly areas that much. Sounds weird, but they just don't really. I don't know why. You like, yeah, because you live in a hilly area, you like it. And, you know, you get the pretty views and everything. But generally speaking, the densest urban development is on the flat. And the thing with Stalybridge is that whilst other areas in Manchester are doing incredibly well, Stalybridge is doing okay.
Yeah.
It's not incredibly good. It's just okay.
Yep.
Relatively speaking, it's amazing compared to the rest of the country. But let's get into this capital growth stuff. Then I'll do the demographics and all of that. I usually do it the other way around. But all right. We've seen. So I better give a bit of context on all of this before I get into the capital growth stuff. And the way markets work is they work in cycles. And here's 1845. This is house price affordability. In the period between 1845 and 1914, First World War, there was a massive amount of house building. And technology improved, and Victorian age was just house building gone crazy. And it went from 13 times earnings down to 2 times earnings after the war. And that would be presumably because financial collapse, a lot of deceased people from the war and so on. Now, Second World War, affordability kind of hovered around, dropped a little bit. And after the war, we had huge rises in the cost of housing, which is interesting because this period is very similar to now in that we've had COVID. So we've got a lot of government debt. So let me show you the government debt chart. And this is government debt since 1900. And you can see First World War suddenly ballooning GDP in the UK, and then a massive spike in the Second World War, and then gradual decline to the 70s. And then in the 70s, we had a lot of inflation. And really from all the way back to 1900, basically flat interest rates. But then we had a period where there was depression, the 1920s depression, and interest rates remained really low all the way from 29 to 1950, which is what, 20 years basically. And now we're now 2008, 2018, so we're now 14 years in. And my prediction is we'll have continued low interest rates, but bouts of high inflation, very similar to the Second World War. We had little rises in interest rates, but not massive ones. So I expect something similar here. And the main point is that you will see house price inflation with inflation. And it's one of the reasons I'm optimistic about the future of the future capital growth story here. And I know that this is general assessment, but it's also the first assessment you've done with us. So I'm just going into this in a little bit of detail here for you, so you understand a little bit about how we think about things and how we think about forecasting. And here we have house price affordability related to mortgage payments and take-home pay. So what this shows is that in every cycle, certainly for the last 2, when you have a market peak, people spend proportionately more on mortgages than they did otherwise. So nearly 50% here, 45% here, average 40% for 5-6 years. So what I expect will happen here is that mortgage costs will rise to about 40%. They'll hold for 5 or 6 years, and then there'll be a big crash, and then we're on to the next cycle. So the crash always looks like this. 2008 in this case dropped for 2 years, settled down, and then slow build up. And different areas have different cycles, but broadly this is the UK cycle, and we're in the boom phase, and we're probably 25-30% in. So the gist is that if it looks expensive today, then it'll look cheap tomorrow or next year. And so when we're assessing areas, what we're really looking for is consistent capital growth and good fundamentals and properties which don't have problems. So compromised properties would be ones beside railways, industrial, places selling hot food, big roads, those kind of things, no parking, and so on. That's compromised. We want the opposite. And yep. I wrote an article all about this, where we have 75 rules or thereabouts, which we follow when we look at property. So, okay, with all that in mind, let's just talk about the capital growth in this area. Now, for Manchester as a whole, capital growth has been a lot higher. Now, if I show you this SK15, we can see that 4-year growth has been 18%, which is a wider area than the one we're looking at, and there's only 4% of areas that have been more successful in this with capital growth. So it is very, very strong on a nationwide view. This little patch, which is bordered by the blue, saw huge growth in the equivalent period last time around, so 2008 to 2003 to 8, when we had the last boom cycle where we are now. It grew 84% and dropped 34%, which is quite a lot. So it was a bit overbought, I would say, last time around. And I suspect this time around it'll do the same. But it did grow, and there is some headroom. So in other words, relatively speaking, in 2008, properties were expensive around here, and they're still below that high water mark from 2008. Going back to this chart, which is so valuable, here is the high water mark 2008, and there's still some headroom, but the difference is interest rates are a lot cheaper now, and therefore people can gear up, and mortgage costs are still not quite there. So for that reason, there is headroom in this, and I think it's somewhat sustainable. So in other words, what you're in for is, if you buy a property in this area and you hang on to it for more than 3 years and you go through the crash, then the property will keep its value, relatively speaking, at the other side of the crash. So that's okay. Nominally, it'll hold its value, but if you adjust for inflation, it'll go back a little bit. So that's the capital growth story here. It's okay. It's a bit fragile. It's okay. Now let's talk about demographics and crime and so on. This is a very English area, and we know this because of the proportion of people that speak English here. And the interesting thing about demographics is they don't change very much. So you have slow change in this area, and we know this because there are 8 sales per 1,000 population in this area. Now in really hot areas, it's more like 15, 16. So there's not that much supply around here, and there's reasonable demand. And we know there's demand because we can see here the turnover, the sales turnover is reasonably high. So properties stay on the market for a while. It's a long drawn out process. And if it's around 26, it just tells me it's a reasonably hot area. A warm area would be 18%. Ridiculously hot would be, say, 35% or something like that. So it's a warm area, and there's certainly a lot of interest here. This property is already under offer, as you know, but there's a story to that, which I explained, and I'll recount again in a few minutes. So, okay, Demographics, very English area, quite a lot of social rented. That's fine. This is local authority housing, but it's a lot of ex-local authority, but this is the right kind of ex-local authority. These are good buildings.
I will speak about ex-social. It's not on this neighborhood. It's a little bit up, north.
But broadly, it's fine, and it looks like ex-local authority to me. But you know, it would have been ex-local authority, which would have been sold to private ownership, and we can see here that's ex-local authority or is local authority. That's not. So we have these tools which kind of helps us work out what's going on, and you can see.
Yeah, the terrace houses are ex-social houses. So
yeah, nice houses, nice area, very low crime. Altogether, it's attractive. Now, before I get into the thing with Marta, I'm just going to quickly stop screen share. I just want to explain the circumstances with this property. It's purple bricks. Purple bricks have a different system to most estate agents. So the owner does the viewings, and then they get to talk with the prospective buyers, obviously. And very often you get an event like this where the buyer meets the person and they like them and they go, well, okay, you'll have it. I've seen this a few times with purple bricks. As a general rule, it's a bad idea to do a viewing with a purple bricks property. Generally speaking, it's just usually leads to fairly bad outcomes. I know how to deal with them, and that's okay. And sometimes we get a really good deal come through with purple bricks, but we got this situation. So this situation is that the seller, and you saw that nice man in the video, that must be the seller. And there was some spiel about it was for a family member doesn't want to live here, therefore blah, blah, blah. To me, this is somebody who bought it. They probably rented it out for a little bit. They renovated it. They tried to sell it. The sale fell through, and they're nervous about anyone who's got potentially weak finance. A foreign national is somebody who would fall into that category, unfortunately. So the reality is for you, Eugenie, that if you're buying, then we've got to find properties where you offer quite high. So you offer high and they need a bit of work so that owner occupiers aren't so interested in these kind of properties. And then you're in a competitive position. And because you've got about £100,000 in proof of funds, you would then put 60 grand down as deposit, maybe 70. And then you might have, say, £10,000 earmarked for renovation. You do your renovations, you're good. So there are lots of property deals out there with your name on it that you can offer on, and you can be offered. But the trick is to find properties where there's slightly less competition and where you can offer more than other people, and then greed takes over. So they go, well, they're offering the highest. They haven't had a bad experience with a sale falling through, so they go, okay, we'll buy from them, and off we go. So that's the thing. But the reason we're doing this assessment for you is because it helps you understand how we think about property and how much detail we go into. Anyway, over to you, Martin, for the rest of the assessment.
So I want to speak for the EPC because we know that the property was sold in 2019 for 80K. So that means this property was really bad condition, and they fully renovated, as you can see. Even I think they changed the floor plan. I tried to find like how was the condition, but they give us the newest photos. So I don't know what kind of condition it was. But because it's on Street View, I can just check, and this will give you just some idea. This is number 7, this is number 5. So this 2019, you can see now how it is. It's compared to.
So they bought it, renovated it, and then they must have must have let it out for a bit. I can't imagine they wouldn't.
Yeah. Yeah, so I want to say that, yeah, what they did is...
Or they may have kept it open, empty, you know, who knows. Anyway, it doesn't
Yeah,
really matter.
yeah,
The point
this
is that...
Yeah, this is just 2009. You can check the door, and the door now are white. So basically, when they did it, they renovate fully. So basically, they change everything, I think. Even because in the EPC it said that it didn't have full double glazed, and now everything is full double glazed. So, and also they for the boiler for this, and everything looks nice and new now. So
okay, can we talk about comparables?
Yeah, I just want to see to talk about the...
Oh yeah, location. Sorry.
Yeah, and I want to say about the location, about
And
the coal mining
risk. Sorry.
Yeah, coal mine. The property is here, and the coal mining are there. So basically, when you check on the Google Maps, those coal minings should be.
They're in that
you never know
parkland,
that.
aren't they?
Yeah, here, somewhere here. So that's so far away, so you don't need to be worried about it.
But there's also parkland.
Yeah.
That parkland to the right, I think, is where the other mine shafts are.
Yeah, maybe. And
if you go back to the coal mining thing, would you?
Yeah, but here.
Yeah, you can see that's the parkland I was talking about.
Yeah, but I think they are somewhere here.
Oh yeah, they're miles away. There's no coal mining risk here.
Yeah, I guess maybe this one can be like a coal mine. Doesn't matter. It's far away. There is no risk for this house, and for the as we said about the flood risk, there is it's low risk. So very low risk from. So if you open the map, you can see that there is no risk at all. If it was down here, maybe you will have some risk, but here, not at all. And I want to say about the location. It's really central to Stalybridge. It's like really close. You have your buses, you have train stops here. You have a lot of markets down. It's like you have schools, you have pounds, you have green space. So it's a little bit far away from central of Manchester, but you have everything around, so basically you don't need to be worried.
Yeah, so you've got Ashton under Lyne. You've got a lot of urban conurbation around there, and therefore there's probably some employment. And
if you want 26 minutes is 26
minutes. You see, that's very good. You can see why an owner-occupier would like this property, because you're up in the hills, you got some views. You're not public transport is excellent here.
Yeah, and you have a lot of green space.
I can see that working.
Yeah, a lot of green space. You have schools, you have good schools, you have a lot of markets. So basically, you have everything. You have the main train step, which is, if you go by walking, I guess it's 12 minutes. So, but this Google Maps
that's
usually
excellent.
Fast.
The issue with this property
is 7-8 minutes.
Yeah, so the issue with Stalybridge is when you go further east and you go away from the railway station and you're kind of in the depths of the hills, that's when public transport gets a bit more tricky.
Yeah.
But this is a very good spot.
Yeah, and what I know fine for Stalybridge, the properties are nice, but the yield doesn't work because the rent's not really high. So you spoke about social houses. Some part of this,
there's a lot of that.
This is social house, but you're too far away. So I will not be. Maybe some of those terrace houses was ex-social house. You can see that they start to renovate, they maintain. So that means they are not social house. So basically, the location and everything is really nice. A point of comparables. This is our you can see one terrace house 170. This is 170 asking. This is not comparable. I will just the new west 180, but this terrace house, so that's not comparable. I want to find semi. Wait, I will sort out by semi. We use Rightmove Plus, which all estate agents use. 170, 150, but it's online auction, so we can avoid 160, 160, 150, 165, 155, 160. So all properties are selling this price, but the problem is the maximum what you can have is 775 for the rent. 775, you basically don't need to do any renovation, but on the 180, let's say the 5.2 yield. So,
yeah, that's tight.
Yeah, but basically you don't need to worry next 10, 20 years. You don't need to worry anything because everything is renovated. Maybe you just need to keep it as it is, find good tenants, and maybe when you change tenants, you need to spend like thousands just to clean and make it good again.
The issue here is that with foreign national mortgages, the interest rates are relatively high, and if you go up to 75% loan to value, it makes the economics very fragile. So in other words, when you get your net cash return, it's borderline break even at that yield. And for foreign nationals, you really have to be getting about 6% yield, rentable yield. And
at least 5.5, at least.
Yeah, minimum 5.5. But then at 5.5, you're looking at capital gain as your main source of wealth gain, as opposed to net cash return.
Yeah, so if you offer 172, it's 5.4, which is borderline because it's really fresh renovated. It's really nice location. Everything works. Expect the yield, because the yield is not really nice, but everything else is good with this property. Let's score it.
Should we do some calculations then?
Yeah,
some scoring, should I say?
Yeah.
All right. So we have close that, and as you see, we've got lots and lots of properties here.
And we're coming more and more and more.
Yeah, and it's quite good because this way we can get the averages and we sort of see what the numbers are like and all of that good stuff. So let's get into it. Condition 4.5. Location. It's actually quite a good location.
4.33. Yeah, it's not perfect. It's a little bit far away from Manchester, but it's still good.
The public transport is absolutely
and you have everything around, like schools. So it's not for 5. Like it's rare when we give a 5 score for something.
So what are you going to give it on area?
Yeah, it's 4. It's good area. Just because
time is good. It's pretty low. Demographics are okay. Not exceptionally good, but I would say they're okay. They're solid. Capital growth is robust. Is it robust? It's not. It's very good capital growth. It's not the best in Manchester. There are some other spots that are a bit stronger than this.
But it's still good.
It's a fundamentally good property in a good area, and I would expect a property like this to be worth 230 in 3 or 4 years' time, which would give it circa 25% growth, but in real terms you've got to factor in inflation and all that. All right, so I'm going to give it a 4 on growth. Sell time, well, it'll sell really quickly. Price,
it's okay, but 3.8 is little because he's doing flipping. So
it'll rent really quickly. Yield,
not good. I'll give
weak.
2.5.
2.
Yeah, 0.5 is because it will sell much higher.
That's really low. So I'm going to give it can I give it a 3?
Yeah,
it's not 3.5.
Yeah.
It's the issue with this is that bit like Sheffield and other areas in Manchester. Let me just do this and we'll do the final roundup. So it's well below average, and all these are fairly tight because by the time we do the viewing, we've already assessed the property pretty comprehensively. We kind of know, and then we do the viewing, and it's below average. 3.95 is average. If it gets above 4, it's certainly an interesting property.
I want to say that Stalybridge is very nice area, but the yield there doesn't work really well. And the issue is that the still capital growth is going up, but the rent is not going up as in other area because it's not really like the best place to rent out a property.
It's a little bit far out for a lot of renters, I think.
Yeah. And it's not really famous for renting like other areas, but it's really close. It's really nice. It will still have good capital growth. Everything will be nice. And as you see, we give like for the yield and for capital growth, we mostly care. Like this is like we give when we give the score, that's 250%. What is compared to what?
This is a relative weighting. So what we do is we say this is the most important thing of all.
Yeah, so that's why the score didn't come, because Stalybridge is famous for that, I mean, not really good yield. So, but everything else is really nice. It's more location for buying and living than buying and renting it out. So,
well, there you go. And I suppose I echo everything Martin says. It's exactly that. Some areas, like, well, just Lee and some of these areas further out,
like Radcliffe, maybe
Radcliffe and so on. What happens there is
Middleton,
that you have lots
Halton.
of nice semi-detached houses in reasonably good order, and people who rent those houses are family people. They have cars. They want to live further out because of quality of life, and they rent really well. And then the other side of the coin is where you go very central, where there's maybe university nearby or whatever, but it has a high proportion of social grade C1s. And we have the data to show which areas are hot for rental and which have a lot of C1s, but there's a lot of variables to this. Yeah, it's a lovely property. It's just not a great, it's on to the next one, basically. That would be my advice. And to reiterate, in your circumstances with your proof of funds, really what I would look for, Martin, you can tell me what you think, is those nice 3-bed semis at the outer boundary of Greater Manchester, where there's competition, but it's not quite so manic, and where one would pay a little bit extra, bid high basically, except that you might have a bit of a down valuation from the mortgage provider. In other words, they say, well, it's worth slightly less than you're prepared than you're offering. That doesn't really affect much. It just means you have to put a bit more cash deposit down. And as I said, you would go for something that needs a bit of renovation. So it's that kind of combination of things. And this would be possibly ex-local authority, 1950s onwards.
No, I think this property is not, but maybe the property is nearby. Yeah.
But I'm talking about the perfect property for Eugenie, and what would work for her, where she would be competitive. And I'm saying that this is the profile. It's kind of Radcliffe, possibly ex-local authority, £160,000, needs about £10,000 in it for renovation.
Or 5, or this is also nice, but the problem with this property is already bitten a lot. So if you can take
but it's in such good condition that owner occupiers are chasing after it real hard. And what you want is something which is not that great condition actually, and owner occupiers, as I said earlier in the video, owner occupiers have very high loan to value. So if they have £10,000 and they're on 90% LTV, that means they can gear it up about 9 times. So they can get £90,000 extra mortgage from having an extra £10,000 in cash. And it just makes more sense for them to put it into more bigger deposit than it is to have a smaller deposit, therefore, and then renovate. It's just, that's the economics of it all. So for you, you're better off going for something that needs some work. Then a load of owner occupiers are not interested. You've got a stronger competitive advantage. Then you have a good outcome.
Yeah, I agree.
So there we are. All right. Thank you very much. I hope this was educational.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.